Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, you may be wondering why I'm taking the time to come and speak with you. Clearly, you are very important people, all of you. And when I listened to the presentation of your Member of Parliament, the part about treating people with dignity resonated with me. So I'm here because I am your servant. And every citizen of Jamaica, whether they are in schools, in hospitals, in workplaces, in churches, wherever they are, in the marketplace, I have a duty to present myself to them. Now, physically, I can't appear to everyone individually. But in today's world, as it has been through various forms, public figures, politicians particularly, have to gather people together. Whether it is the proverbial town square, or today we use virtual platforms. This is kind of in between. You are in a proverbial town square in your very small hall. Which we will make into a decent sized auditorium. And I'm sure that whatever we say here will be transmitted virtually to everyone who wants to see it. So, in effect, this is a stage, a platform, an opportunity for me to speak to every Jamaican, but to speak to this age group of Jamaicans, this cohort of Jamaicans. Now, some of you will become voters very soon. Some of you are already voters. And of course, teachers are here already. The business of your country is absolutely important. There are some, unfortunate, who are frustrated, dismayed, don't have enough information to make decisions about their country. And there are those who are very worried about their future. As you leave this stage of your life, graduating from high school, looking to go, some of you to university to extend your education, some of you, because of economic circumstances, you will have to work. Some of you are even thinking of migrating. I am tempted to say, by show of hands, who are seeking to migrate? I'm not going to do that. I already know it's a quite large percentage. So I'm here today to, one, make the connection with you as citizens, but young citizens, who will, by virtue of your franchise, your right to vote, could have an impact on the future of the country. So every one of you here has the power to determine the future of not just your life, but of the entire nation. And the nation is at what I would like to describe as an inflection point. Anybody knows what that is? All of you mathematics students? You're a math teacher? Yes, a gradient change, but it means at a point of a rapid change. The rate of change changes. Yes. So we are at that inflection point. Some people say we are at a tipping point. That's where something great or bad could happen. But I don't think it's great or bad. I think it's an inflection point with an upward trajectory. We are right at that point. And let me tell you why I think we are at the inflection point. And what are the threats to that rapid upward shift in our growth trajectory. For many years, longer than most of you in this room have been alive, our economy has been weighed down by debt. At one point in time, 10 years ago, our debt to GDP was at 150%. You know what that means? The economic students inside here will immediately know what that means. Right? I see Martin Luther King is smiling because you're an economic student. Precisely. I'd ask you to explain. Come on, explain it. Come on.
I'm not sure if I can explain this properly for you.
No, but explain it for them.
Oh, God. So basically, we owe 150% to GDP.
10 years ago.
10 years ago. So, well, obviously that means we owe them a lot of money. So, yeah, at more than what we have. So
more than what we produce.
Yeah,
yes.
more than what we produce. Plus, on top of that, so we're very, very bad in debt. Debt. So yeah, it just means that we owe more than what we produce, plus half of that, and we have to somehow make that back so we can get out of debt.
So it's the foundation of the explanation. So 10 years ago, or just about 10 years ago, the country was really in a crisis. That was a tipping point. The totality of what the country produced, we owed in debt, plus 50% on top of that. That's what it meant. So two things could change that. Two things could change that situation. Anyone care to tell me what those could be, what options we have or had? So one thing we could do is to increase the size of our GDP, which is our total output. Or we could have our debt forgiven. The people who we owe the debt to could say, all right, Jamaica, you guys are so cool, we'll write off the debt. There are some other options. One option is the country could default and say we're not paying. But that's not an option. Our constitution does not allow that. So whatever debt we have, we must pay it. And because that is our constitutional arrangement, it is even more important that we do not get back into a situation where we have such high debt. There is another option as well, which is we can limit what we consume and use that to pay down the debt. Now, some of you may be too young to remember this, but Jamaica went through that exact scenario in the last decade, where we had to go through what was called fiscal consolidation, austerity measures. We had to manage what we spent to get ourselves out of debt. Today, our debt to GDP ratio is somewhere in the region of about 78%. By the time we get to the next financial year, we will probably be about 74%. So I want you to understand the magnitude of what we have gone through. Through the sacrifice of your parents, who endured new taxation almost every year. No budget to repair roads. No budget to invest in healthcare. No budget to invest in public transportation. No budget to invest in garbage collection. No budget to build the auditorium that you're asking for. No budget to pay increased wages to our public servants. And we went through that process in order to bring down our debt. Sometimes I listen to the public conversation and it is disconnected from the reality of our situation. It is important that the next generation of Jamaicans are grounded in our struggle and understand it. And do not argue in public debates as if public finances just appear from out of the air, or there is some reserve money that is out there somewhere that the government can just reach in and take. Everything that we have, which is known as the budget, comes from you, all of you. Whether it is your GCT, your income tax, or the other taxes that you pay, or the other fees. The ability of the government to spend depends on the revenues it gets from the economy. And if the economy isn't doing well, the government cannot spend. For many decades, in our economic psychology, the term I'm coining, or rather in the political economy of Jamaica, if the government didn't have tax revenues, then we could borrow. And for many years, governments existed on borrowing. That's how we ended up at 150% of what we were producing. But that's not the complete story. The debt also increased because we had something called FinSac, the collapse of the financial sector, and government had to take private debt and make it public debt. But there were also poorly run public sector entities. Some of you may remember Air Jamaica, Sugar Company, NWC. All of those debts had to be brought on to the public account. So Jamaica reached a tipping point, a crisis point, where we had to say we're going to be fiscally responsible. And you know what the word fiscal means. It means we must be responsible in how we arrange our public financing. It means we can't spend more than we are earning. So there are many persons who like to think that there is no connection between our output and our expenditure. There is an immutable connection between what we produce and what we are able to spend. And if we start to disregard that, then we're going to go back to borrowing. I don't want the next generation to think that way. You who will occupy the public space and lead public discourse must totally eliminate that from your consciousness and challenge those who speak like that. Now, going forward, the government has established 2 lines of efforts which it will pursue. the first line of effort we have been ongoing, and that is on increasing our productivity. You are not going to hear much conversation about productivity. You hear a lot of talk about increase pay. Government must spend more. But you don't hear anyone say that Jamaica's productivity is amongst the lowest in the region. You're not hearing anyone saying that our productivity has not grown for the last 30 years. What is productivity? Productivity is the rate at which each factor of production increases its output. And you are all factors of production in one form or the other. Some of you will become employers and employees, so you're part of the labor force and the management force. Some of you will become entrepreneurs and holders of capital. Some of you will become innovators and create technology and new methods of doing things. And all of that contributes to productivity, output. We need the next generation of Jamaicans to focus on productivity, your productivity. Because that is the only way we're going to expand our GDP. Notice the ratio. If we expand our GDP, what happens to our debt? It goes down. Even if we don't pay it down, the ratio goes down. It becomes less of a risk to us if we expand our output. It might be very difficult to engage other sectors of the society in this conversation, but I have to start engaging you because you are going to take over the economy. You are going to become the new workers of the future. You are the new managers of the future. You are the new innovators of the future. And I need you to start thinking about how you are going to become the most productive generation of Jamaicans. Productivity is not a cultural challenge for us. Wherever I travel in the world, I meet Jamaicans. And they are all over. And when I talk to the people who they work for, they are very complimentary of how Jamaicans are productive, innovative, and how they take initiative. So why is it that we're not seeing a massive productivity increase in Jamaica? But yet, we are exporting our productivity, exporting our talents every year to other economies, to have other economies grow. I'm certain that in this room, a large percentage of the talent that sits here is thinking about migrating. And for decades that has been the case. Jamaica is a net exporter of its talent. Jamaica cannot grow unless we are able to attract new talent. We need to attract new talent into Jamaica, and we need to keep the existing talent that we have. So I'm asking all of you here to think about how you're going to make the long-term commitment to Jamaica. Yes, you may have to migrate to improve your talent, to get education and so forth, but still think about how you can come back in and contribute. So for the last 8 years or so, we've been at 1 or 2 or 3% growth. We may have hit a 5% growth in 1 year. But we need to crack that threshold now and start looking at 5, 6, 7, 8% growth. That rapid rate of change where the growth curve moves from this is the inflection point, to this. That's where we need to be. And to get that, we need to crack the productivity issue. And it starts with a mindset change. And I'm hoping today that I'm reaching into your minds and hopefully effecting in it a new way of looking at the future of your country. Now, one of the greatest complaints I have from business people, let me not say business people, from employers, because a general complaint, is that they can't find labor. They can't find people to work. It's paradoxical because walk anywhere at midday and you see all kinds of people not looking employed. Lots of young people like yourself not employed. What is happening? What is happening? Can anybody offer a perspective? Any of the teachers may want to offer a perspective as to why is this? Oh, all right, let's dissect it very quickly. So there is a formal and an informal economy. Now, when we measure employment, we don't ask if you are formally employed. We ask, have you been employed gainfully, working for pay over the last X number of, I think it's weeks or months or whatever it is. So they don't really say, they don't ask what you are employed in specifically. They do ask, but it's a very wide list of employment. So the real problem with employment in the country is that we now have the lowest unemployment rate ever. So remember, we are 4.5%. We still have a way to go. Trinidad is 3.5% thereabout. United States is at 3. Canada is at 3. The UK is at maybe 4. But in other words, other countries have lower unemployment rate than we do. So at 4.5, even though we celebrate it, I think we still have a way to go to truly absorb more people into the labor force. Which is why I said that you are going to be the first generation that when you leave high school, your probability of being employed, within the first year would be as high as 90%. Because they really need people to work. Very high. Youth unemployment, however, is now in the low teens. So maybe not 90% if you consider what youth unemployment is. So maybe you have an 80% chance of being employed. But that's still very high. Still very high. But getting a job once you're qualified within a reasonable period of time, high probability. But there is a challenge. And the challenge is that the economy requires skills. So yes, there are many jobs that require laborers, just low-level, unskilled work. But more of the jobs that are being created requires skills. In other words, the jobs that are going to add the greatest value to the growth of the economy requires skills. And that is where the problem is. So most of the people that you see not absorbed into the economy are outside of the economy because they don't have skills. So, one of the reasons why I'm speaking to you today and address your wider school population is that it is important that you stay in school, that you graduate with not just certification, but with a practical skill. Absolutely important. Absolutely important. It's important for you, but it is important for the economy to increase its productivity. Can you imagine that the problem we have now is that we don't have enough people to employ? A good problem to have, but a problem nonetheless. And we have to solve it. So I have to get into your minds now so that you start to think about how do I make my labor and my skills available to the Jamaican economy. So, I hope you're seeing that our economy is on a fairly good footing. If we can solve the labor issue, we can get more skilled people, we will start to fuel greater economic growth. But that's not the only critical variable in the equation. There is another line of effort that the government must now pay attention to. And that is building peace in our society. Now, when I say peace, a lot of you are saying, but our country is not at war. We don't have armed conflict. We're not being invaded by an outside entity, as you have said, very correct. But let's look at our murder rate. It's almost comparable to countries that are at war. Almost, we are in civil war territory. Why is this so? Why? By the way, 10 years ago, it was a Jamaica problem. It's just Jamaican people. Now, Trinidad, St. Lucia, St. Kitts, the Bahamas, St. Vincent, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, Panama, Belize. I'm not even going to mention Mexico. Why is it that there is this problem of high homicide rates in these countries? Something has gone wrong. Firstly, without question, the way in which we have socialized our young people has left them violence prone. Our society has become permissible to violence. And it's something that we have to address. We cannot run our society without paying attention to values. Now, I'm not speaking about morality. I'm not speaking about a religious perspective on how the society should operate. That's not what I'm speaking about. But I am speaking about values. And there can be no cohesive society without a set of well-established and accepted values. And what has happened to our society is that our value system is in a state of anomie. It's not quite established what our values are. So we are in this constant struggle of wanting to be free to do what we want to do, free to express ourselves, free to take our position, but yet everyone must be respected. Oftentimes, freedom to do what I want to do will end up in someone feeling disrespected. And when those two things collide, you end up in conflict. And how do you resolve this conflict? Oftentimes, we resort to violating the human personhood in a physical way. And unfortunately, it results in the ultimate violence, the taking of life. So yes, there are social issues which has resulted in us losing respect for the value of life and placing over the value of life personal respect and personal freedom. So the value of life is not the highest value. But then there's another element which is happening in societies like ours. And that is the organization of violence. So it's one to have social violence. You are in school, somebody step on your clocks. You see that? You disrespect my shoes. Your life is not valuable more than my shoes. So I beat you to a pulp. When it could be easier to say, you know, let me wipe it off. Let me get my foam thing and my toothbrush and brush it off and call it a day. Beat the poor little guy to a pulp. But it gets worse than that because there are people in our society who see youngsters like yourself and say, well, you're wasting time trying to get work 9 to 5. You can earn more money. You see, all of you know it, eh? Chopping. Or some other form of scamming. Or some other form of illegal activity. That's one. But you also have youngsters who say, you know, well, my situation is such that I grew up in a board house on Cumberland Road in Spanish Town, right next to near Grassyard Market. Parents couldn't send me to a big school. I never did well. And so I have to hustle and struggle and rob and kill. But there are those who have the similar circumstances who decided that they are not going to take that route. And there are those who are very intelligent. They might not have certificates, but they're very intelligent. And they see this disenfranchisement. They see this vulnerability. And they say, come join me, man. Come join me. And they create an enterprise for criminality. And when you are sucked in, you might not even know this. What you are seeing is an opportunity to get money, wear good clothes, and what they say, graft. And before you know it, you are in a gang. So yes, the breakdown in our values, but the emergence of the organization of violence through criminal gangs. So there are two things that are happening in the society in parallel. And the more there is a deterioration in the value system, the greater gangs find recruits. And the more entrenched the gangs become until they believe they are a law unto themselves and they can challenge the state. And you are seeing that. Haiti is an extreme example. But you only have to look at the news in Ecuador, where organized gangs have used violence to threaten the state. We have that in our country. So we don't have war, but we don't have peace. Because there is an element of our society that if it is not addressed in the firmest way, could emerge to threaten our national security. The president of Ecuador has had to declare a state of public emergency because, in his words, the country is embroiled in an internal conflict. He didn't call it a civil war because it's not a political conflict, but as an actor within the state is trying to undermine the state. And that's what these gangs are, and they have to be addressed. So I'm speaking to this audience of young people because you are the favored recruits for gangs. Many of you may have friends. You know people who are slowly being pulled in, and they think it's quite innocent. You can reach and hold them and pull them back. So the government has to focus now in a deliberate way on building peace. And that focus has to treat with the gangs. And you see what we have been doing in using the anti-crime legislation within our law to bring the gangs before the courts for justice to be dispensed to them. It is a long process to undermine them and totally eliminate them from the society. It is a scourge on our society that we must eliminate. And we cannot be ambivalent about it. They are not Robin Hood stealing from the rich to help the poor. They are criminals and murderers. And there must be no sympathy for them. And as I look in this room, I know that there is ambivalence. Because some of you know them. They may be even family members. But when they come together like that, they are a threat to your own safety and security. And we must eliminate them from our midst. But the other element is, what are we going to do about the values? How are we going to return our society to a value hierarchy where life is the greatest value? Where life is the greatest value. And that the person, the physical representation of the person, is invaluable. That's where we need to be. So the government has put in place a commission to study this whole business of violence. And there are some recommendations that will come. There are a few of them. For example, a recommendation that has been about for a long time, but the commission has studied it in detail. And the recommendation is that there should be a total ban on corporal punishment. That is going to be a controversial one, but I think that the society is at this point now where it must confront itself on how it uses violence as a means of disciplining children. Because that's what corporal punishment is. It is a violation of the personhood of the child. There are some other recommendations. For example, when conflicts arise in communities, in families, and someone goes to the police station and reports it, what is the police empowered to do? Police gives you a warning. So if you go to the police station and say, somebody threatened to do me harm, or I had a conflict, as was the case recently in Trelawney, where there was a family dispute. It was brought to the attention of the police, and then the following day, the person was killed by relatives. And we have seen many situations like this. In the case where 5 persons were killed in Clarendon, you recall, the person who did the killing was brought to the attention of the police before he had committed an act of violence against a family member. So the way in which we recognize and preemptively deal with persons who have displayed violent tendencies, we need to change our laws to empower our police to be able to act very quickly. So these are just some things that we're going to have to do to improve and build peace in our country. But the most important thing that we can do, which is why I'm here with you today, is that we have to have this conversation with every Jamaican, especially our young people, about how we choose to live with each other. Because at the end of the day, no matter how many laws we change, no matter how many police we put on the street, it is going to be your personal decision. It's going to be how you choose to react. So I'm appealing to all of you here to become ambassadors for peace. You are the sixth formers. You are the leaders of discipline in the school. You are also academic leaders in the schools. You are role models in the schools. You can become the model of peace for those who look up to you. So, my appeal to you, the students, the sixth form of Manchester High School, is that in your school and in your community and in your friend group, that you all must become ambassadors for peace. Do I have that commitment from the students? If our 2 lines of effort work, if you increase the productivity of the country, which I'm certain that this will be the most productive generation of Jamaicans in the last 50 years, this generation sitting right here. That increase in productivity will also spawn in itself an increase in peace. More people employed, less people being dragged into gangs. And that greater peace itself will lead to prosperity. Don't be shy and afraid of that word. Prosperity is something that is promised to you, and that you should lead your life for it. And prosperity doesn't mean, abundance and wealth. It means fulfillment and satisfaction, and it means peace. So let's increase our productivity, increase our peace. That will increase our prosperity, which will increase our productivity, which will increase our peace, which will increase our prosperity, which will increase our productivity. What do you call that? A virtuous cycle. That's what we want to create in Jamaica. A virtuous cycle. Productivity, peace, prosperity. More productivity, more peace, more prosperity. God bless you and thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Prime Minister, for sharing your heart and mind with the students here at Manchester High. Very important students, because the